Hey, folks, welcome back to What's Next Beyond Service. Today, episode number 33 is entitled Explosive Past. And our guest today is William Plummer. Will, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
Absolutely. So, Will served in the Army for 25 years. He enlisted in 1995, was an infantryman, and served as an indirect fire mortarman in a light infantry division. At some point, he got into the EOD or explosive ordnance disposal field, and that became his passion. That's what he spent the most time in the Army doing. At some point, he took a step backwards and became a commissioned officer after being a master sergeant in the Army. That's a senior staff NCO with a lot of time and grade and responsibility. And again, somehow he decided that being an officer would be a good thing. He commanded twice as an officer. He was in operations. He was in intelligence. He attended the Naval War College, where he earned his MA in National Security and Strategic Studies with a concentration in irregular warfare. He rounded out his time in the Army at 25 years and transitioned and wound up founding a company called Ray Secure, and he is currently serving as their chief security officer. So that's kind of a quick rundown on Will. And again, Will, I appreciate your time today. We were chatting here before hitting the record button, and Will was giving me the rundown of his past 24 hours, and I'm surprised he's still awake. So he's been very busy, but he's kind enough to stick to his word for interviewing today. So we certainly appreciate that, and we love having folks like you on, where we can hear a little bit about your past, what you did in the military, certainly your transition story, and then obviously the things you're doing today. It's always good for folks to be able to see that when I leave the military, there are good things that happen in life, and you're someone that's going to share that with us today. So all that said, Will, if we can start out, let's go back in time to the young Will and what he's contemplating. What was the deciding factor that brought you into the Army? And if there's things prior to that lead to that story, absolutely. And I'm going to let you tell your story here.
So, the typical movie fashion of I was doing nothing good with myself or my life. At the ripe age of 18, I looked around and 1994, 95, marijuana was not legal in the state of California. I had a bunch of it, and it was enough that I looked it up and went, "This is federal." So I gave it all away, walked into a recruiter, and pretty much joined the Army and didn't really look back. I was old enough to know that I was not old enough to be in charge of my own life, and I needed somebody to yell at me a little bit longer. So that's kind of why I joined.
Right. Well, I'm surprised you didn't go with aim high with the Air Force.
I'll tell you
Little
what,
joke there.
a couple of trips to the Middle East, and you're sleeping in a very uncomfortable position. Then you see where the Air Force guys are sleeping. And you're like, I made a mistake.
Yeah, the Marines are are good for that as well. Making the mistake on, there's always that joke about the Air Force. Always, the first thing they do whenever they build a new base or facility is they build the the golf course. Then they go back and get money for everything else.
Right.
So anyhow, all right. Well, so you made a decision and you went into the Army,
Yep.
and you went into the infantry. You were a mortarman. You were with an airborne unit. That's a pretty tough life. Those years. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting. Sitting in basic training, and you go to Army folks, you go to AIT, and for infantry, it's just congratulations, you graduated basic training, and then the next 10 minutes you start AIT, and nothing really changes. And they said on my contract said 11 X-ray, and 11 series for the Army is the infantry MOS, right? Um, and it's what's 11 X-ray? And the guy's like, "Don't worry about it. You'll all be 11 Bravos." That's the recruiter. And I get the basic, and then we go to AIT, and next thing you know, all the short people are holding mortar tubes, and all the 6'2" guys are holding M16s, and wondering how this happened. And the drill sergeant was nice enough to explain to us that you people can do some math, and you could do adding and subtracting and figure out the fire direction control computer. So you are a mortarman. So it was not a planned event, but it's definitely a size disparity between us and the rest of 11 Bravos. So,
Yeah, it's at least it's nice to know there's some rhyme or reason as to how things happen, right? And and it's absolutely true. You want folks with a bit of aptitude shooting mortars or firing artillery, right? Because
absolutely.
that's a bit of an art and science for sure. So yeah. So you spent how many years were you in the infantry as a mortarman?
Uh, 2.5 to 3. There was an airborne accident that basically guy in front of engineer stalled the door, and when when you're exiting an aircraft, one left, right. Jump master didn't have time to get me back online, so I went out at the same time as another guy. Caught a pair of boots in the face. Base plate was strapped to the outside of my rucksack. Leg restraints broke. That caught me in the face.
Oh,
Landed
geez.
unconscious. They left me in the field for 5 days. Fort Greely, Alaska, so it was really, really cold outside. And nitrocellulose doesn't burn very well at that temperature, so we had a lot of short rounds, a lot of duds. And my section sergeant at the time said, "You don't have to snowshoe out of here. You stay and wait for the EOD team to show up." And I, blood covered, been there for 5 days. Like seriously, probably should have seen a medic or two. And
Sure.
the I had no clue what EOD was. And this helicopter comes flying in. A Chinook lands. The staff sergeant walks out the back and stands on the tailgate. A specialist runs up to the dud pit, sets the demo charge, runs back to his staff sergeant, says, "Yep, we're good." Demo shot goes off. I walk to the staff sergeant. I'm like, "Hey, who are you and what are you doing here?" And he goes, "We're the EOD team. An hour ago, we were drinking beer in the hotel in Fort Greely." I'm like, "Why are you clean?" Again, the hotel. I want that job. So the next Monday morning, without even consulting my wife, I was beating on the door of the EOD shop to figure out how to get out of what I was doing and into what they did.
Right.
So best accidental mistake of my life.
Yeah, it sounds like a scene from a movie, it really does.
Kinda. It was one of those like it was a life changing event. I sat there for those 5 days thinking these people don't really care. I literally saw our medics a little different than your corpsmen, right?
Yeah.
There's a little bit less on some of the training for the E4 that you have in your infantry unit that's there to give IVs in case something goes wrong. So I probably should have seen somebody higher than that, and I just kind of walked away going, I need to change something because this is not where I need to be. And
Right.
purely by happenstance, it ended up being the right place.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And about the corpsmen on the Marine Corps Navy side, our corpsmen, we love our corpsmen.
Yep.
Those guys and gals are solid. I mean, it's not you very rarely run across one that's that you would be concerned about
Yep.
having care from. And it's a good program, and especially the at some point they can become independent duty corpsmen, which they have a lot of breadth of responsibility and experience, and obviously education and training. So yeah, we rely on them heavily. They're 100% part of what we do, and yeah, it's a bit of a cultural thing there too. I think with
It
the
is.
Navy corpsmen.
I had a
So
lot of experience with the Marines and the Navy between deployments and UD school is a Navy school. So I had cancer in the middle of UD school, like testicular cancer, and the
oh
Army
wow,
medics had told me, "Don't worry about it. You're not in the right bracket." I'm like, "But there's something wrong." And he looked at it, he's like, "Yeah, you're good." The first person that saw it outside of my wife was a Navy corpsman in the middle of UD school who had some expletives and called me several names because I should have taken care of it long ago. And
wow.
3 Navy corpsmen later, I was sitting in an Air Force base having a right radical orchiotomy as they removed it. And it was the only reason why I went in as early as I did was because of the Navy corpsmen, 100%.
Wow. Well, God bless you, man. That's incredible. I mean, that could have absolutely been a life ender
Yep,
at some point if it wasn't for somebody paying attention and then doing something about it, right? Kind of
100%.
pushing you in that direction. Absolutely. I mean, you always have to be concerned and advocate for yourself health wise, but it really does make a difference when you have proactive people
Yep.
in that field that know what to do and how to do it. And yeah,
And
that's
what to look
well,
for.
that's
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it was very interesting to watch the difference between what I had seen up to that point, and my medical care in the Army was great. I'm saying an embedded medic in an EOD company, or sorry, in an infantry company is just starting their career, and
sure.
they're left alone with a bunch of infantrymen, so it's not really great for their starting. But
Yeah.
that those first two corpsmen absolutely took charge of my life. We're going
Well,
here. Your next step is here, and it was definitely a different experience
yeah.
that I had. It's really good.
No, absolutely. And so, kind of fast forwarding a bit,
Mhm.
you were the what staff and COIC of Ordnance School? Is that
So what I did
or
during the
EOD rather? Yeah.
yeah, so during the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, we had a lot of people who obviously, I mean, you were in the same time. We all kind of got flung in a problem we didn't have solutions to. So I did the invasion of Iraq. I was a staff sergeant. I was basically disarmed the bridges to Baghdad, went with third ID. If you read the book Thunder Run, all that stuff, did all that, right? Cleared Baghdad International Airport, or Saddam's at the time, and then came back from that deployment. The IEDs then started. A bunch of other stuff happened. Came back from that deployment, and nobody in our school at Redstone Arsenal had any deployment time. They just got put in a stop move. The school has to continue to run. We need to push people through here. None of them had been there, so I was the first one that got sent and basically set up a pre-deployment anti-terrorism course that sent all four services came through. What we did
Wow.
was 2 weeks. The first week we'd show them, off SIPR, we'd show them all the stuff that was going on in the part of the world they were going to, Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever. And then the second week we'd throw the same IEDs at them and the same threats that were going on in that valley or in that town that they were going to go take over for the next 12 to 15 months. So we set that up. It was called Gator. But it's been changed now, obviously, since then. But and we just constantly filled it with people who would just come back. So you're going to Kandahar. Great, we're bringing in people from a unit that just redeployed from Kandahar, and they're going to sit and mentor you for 2 weeks. So before you go into country, you at least know as much as we could possibly teach you.
Wow. No, that's pretty intense actually. That's a great. So, uh, what was the it sounds like that came together quickly. So,
Fairly quickly.
uh, right. And it wound up being something that all the services went to. So, what's kind of the backstory with that? It was the Army driving that, or
So the Army started it, started the driving factor on that, and it was because we had a few accidents. I mean, you've not ever seen or been or spent time in the Middle East dealing with all the things that possibly happen. So the Army took a pre-existing course that we had that was refresher, is what it used to be called, to bring in EOD units, complete units, and put them in a training environment for 2 weeks. And all they really did was we just rewrote it and turned it into something for the Army. Well, then it turned into promotion points or a promotion requirement for the Air Force. So before you made
wow.
E7, you had to go through one of 6 courses, and this is one of them. The Marines picked it up. It's something that they used again for promotion and validation for their badging. So senior master and whatever UD badge you got. I ran it for about 3.5 years, and then I ran off to get a commission after that. But it it ended up being something I was extremely proud of, and one of the higher points of my career. I think we spent a lot of work and time, but we saved a lot of lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And the significance of that is huge. When you talk about saving lives, and then you also talk about career progression, when this becomes an item that's required, for the next thing, next rank, uh, that's a big deal, and that it becomes proven, right?
Yeah.
That's yeah, that is a significant accomplishment. So from there, it looks like you wind up going off to officer candidate school in the Army. What was the impetus for that? What was the deciding factor to say, hey, I've got a great career going. I want to do something a little different, or I want to, be an officer. What was that all about?
There's two driving factors for that. One, the Army restructured the entire EOD career field. So up to that point, an EOD company was about 13 people. We had one officer, and the joke has always been that they're only there in case a nuke shows up because you have to have a commissioned officer to sign for anything that goes along with a nuke. So for a nuclear weapon. So that we were restructured, we got platoon leaders and we got executive officers and we got, the commander now had 44 people. We restructured the whole thing. And I looked at that and I went, hey, right now I'm a senior NCO and I'm about to be stuffed on staff. And if I can avoid staff and stay tactical, I'll be a very happy guy. So what I thought would happen was I would go to OCS, go to officer basic course, and get handed a platoon and go be a platoon leader, then an XO in a company, and then a company commander, and then maybe that progression of 5-6 years, maybe then I'll get staff. But at that point, I was already 12 years enlisted, so that'll get me to 20. That is not what happened. And the second reason why I switched over to be an officer was it was people were even the branch managers were looking at people that were senior NCOs and who could transfer over because it takes a long time to train an EOD technician.
Sure.
It takes an even longer time to train a good one to be an officer. So they were reaching out for, I'm not saying shortcuts, but it was one of the, look, we need you now. I mean, you were in when the fall of all the waivers came down and everybody could do anything they wanted to. It was kind of
Right.
during that period.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but I guess to your point though, when you look at needing to build out, and especially if you're going to do that in the officer ranks, and because of the timing and the expertise and experience that comes with what you bring with your, at that point, 12 years of service, to me, it's a no-brainer that you want somebody like you to do that, right? Not that you're not going to, I'll go back real quick. A TBS story for me in the Marine Corps. Once you go through officers candidate school, all the officers go, and warrant officers as well, go to the basic school. It's a 6-month course up in Quantico where you learn how to be a provisional platoon commander, and you learn all the weapons, you shoot all the weapons, you call for fire. It's the whole deal. And then you go off and be whatever you become MOS wise. But where I was going with this is that you have a level of experience as an officer, and at TBS there was a guy, super nice guy. He didn't want to be an infantry officer, and he probably shouldn't have been an infantry officer, but he got selected to do that. And then they decided, no, let's make him a combat engineer. So on top of that, he's got explosives, and he was like, holy crap, and I think he did a tour and got out. But, folks went to our staff platoon commander, the captain who ran our platoon, and were like, hey, sir, look, we spent 6 months with this guy and we don't think this is a good idea.
Right.
And he was like, that's nice, Lieutenant, go back and, finish your training. But, at any rate, so all that said, I mean, you just don't want anybody doing that. And so certainly having somebody with your expertise and, the knowledge that you bring, becoming an officer, because you're going to have that, you've got the leadership already baked in, you've got that time and experience. And so, yeah, I think I would have felt very comfortable working with you in that capacity. So I can see, the goodness and how that happened.
Yeah, you get to be higher up in the staff, and you go, okay, wait, there's actually a planning effort behind this stuff. There's reasons that they do things like that, and I probably should have known that as a senior NCO, but I looked at them like, yeah, well, they just need people. No, there was no training in place, so officer basic course equivalent for us for UD, it didn't exist. We have to build the people first, and then we'll build the training, and it kind of like was doing the whole plane in flight, conundrum.
Yeah.
And looking back a couple of years afterwards, being a commander with PLs that worked for me, it's like, there's a reason why we did some of the things that we did. You just don't necessarily see it when you're part of the process.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, so then, you're in the pipeline, you become an officer, and you had a progression in your mind of how that's going to work, and you said it didn't quite work out that way, and so you're off to the races.
Yeah, so I didn't have to go to UD school, so I'd already gone. I didn't have to do that stuff. So I graduated OBC and got immediate orders to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. All right, this is great. I'm going to go be a platoon leader. And I was about 60 miles from Fort Bragg, and one of my buddies that we were senior NCOs together. He stayed enlisted. He was a master sergeant and was giggling at me as I was going to become a second lieutenant. Said, "Hey, you need to go by the battalion headquarters." And if you've been around EUD, I mean, it's a small community. Everybody. So Jeff calls Will and says, "Hey, you need to go to go to the battalion headquarters." Yeah, but I'm not. I'm signing in, dude. He goes, "No, you need to go over there. Don't sign in. Just go over." So, wife and kids are still in the car. We were driving from Redstone Arsenal, Alabama, and I pull up to the battalion headquarters, stick my head in, kind of unshaven because I literally am PCSing from point A to point B. And the XO leans over, and I'm like, "Oh no, the S3? No, they'd all been my students when I was an instructor, so they'd
Oh,
come
wow.
through the entire battalion staff." And I hadn't been paying attention because as the time you're an instructor, you're not actually in the forces command. You're not in the ones that go. You're in the training and doctrine command. So I didn't
Right.
know who was where. I wasn't paying attention. Stuck my head in. I'm like, oh no. So no. 13 days later, I deployed as an S2 with the orders from the battalion commander. You will keep my 3 and my XO from doing stupid things. So for that 12-month deployment, I sat in the talk or up at the brigade, or actually at the division headquarters in Baghdad, and brief general officers as a second lieutenant. And GO would turn and go, "Why is this lieutenant talking to me?" And the battalion commander would lean in. He's like, "Because I listen to what he says. He doesn't match up. The rank doesn't match up what he's done. All that stuff." And I kept them from doing things like firing air weapons platforms at improvised rockets that would just fire them off in random directions. Uh, Two field grade officers with a really big motivation to, I'm not saying be gung ho, but something along those lines,
Right.
should not be left alone without an adult supervision. And I got to do
Right.
that. So it was a different OER. Even your evaluation report's it's a little bit different when they fill it out when you're tasked to watch your boss. So
Yeah. Yeah, boy. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, some of that is necessary, and I mean, especially at the rank of second lieutenant, that's freaking seriously. That's tough. That's it's like pissing up a rope to a degree, I guess. But
in the EOD career field, it's actually it's not as hard as you would think. It's everybody, and it's just kind of baked in when you go through EOD school. Every single person, A, is a safety, and B, is a trained technician, a trained team leader. You don't go to EOD school to be a team member. You go to EOD school to be the person that can disarm bombs, and you do it all. And a lot of it's based on your technical capability and how much people trust you. So I wasn't standing in front of the battalion staff and calling the XO or the 3, a moron for what they were doing. But it's
sure.
like, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You walk by their building a talk, and they says, "Yeah, let the Hellfire go." "Hey, sir, what are you firing? What are you authorizing Hellfire to shoot at?" And then you get the story like, "No, no, no, please, sir, don't do that." And then you end up, because they listen to you and trust you, they don't look bad, but it was
Right.
an interesting environment to be in. I learned a lot. Or, I mean, like my first command was a first lieutenant, and I had command with a unit that we supported JSOC. So I spent most of my time in Joint Special Operations Command, sending guys to the Middle East, in 2-man teams and trying to figure out how to write doctrine for something we had never done before. Hey, we want to jump
Wow.
out of planes. EOD teams don't jump out of planes. We have explosives. Well, we got to figure out how to do it. And so that was my first command, was working with JSOC and seeing and getting your eyes opened up to a lot of the communities you don't normally get to interact with.
Right. Well, that's pretty impressive, and it sounds like you've been on the precipice of doing new stuff, innovating, in the field of EOD, and yeah, that's actually that's pretty cool. When you have a non-traditional role to serve in the military, because it's when you're doing that new thing, when you're trudging through new ground, you have a lot of times you have a lot of your left and right lateral limits are pretty wide, especially if they trust what you're doing. And so yeah, that leads to better things down the road too, for sure.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
let me look at my watch here real quick. So we're at about 27 minutes in. So let's just push real quick. So you did command twice. You went to the Naval Postgraduates, or Naval Warfare uh,
No problem.
College,
Yep.
and how did that degree help you for where you are now? That you know, getting a degree from those schools, you're there to take part in the curriculum,
Mhm.
but there's a little added work that you do to obtain your master's degree. It's just like going to command and staff college, Marine Corps wise. So, looking at the degree you got, the national security, strategic studies, and the emphasis on irregular warfare. Um, was that something that helped you as you decided, post career, what you were looking to do, and the things that you learned were you able to implement that into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I would absolutely say it does. So, I mean, critical thinking is it's something that it's learned. You need to have, and it's really important to actually be able to think critically and problem solve, and that often gets beyond what you normally are exposed to. So that was a really eye-opening experience for me. I made the comment earlier. I had a couple of my retirements denied, and they denied my retirement right before they sent me there. Nope, we got something for you to do. They tried to send me to Fort Leavenworth, where the Army has it in the middle of Kansas. And I said,
Mhm.
no, not going. I was coming out of Korea at the time. And then I said, what about the Air Force? I said, no, not going. Well, what about the Navy? Yeah, okay, it's Newport, Rhode Island. My daughter lives in Boston now. Well, my wife will be happy. We're coming over from overseas. It'll be good. I absolutely learned more in the year that I spent there about how to figure out, frame, and problem solve than I did in any other leadership course that I had throughout the Army.
Wow.
Not necessarily because of any rope bridges or anything that you do that you get good at to problem solve, but when you start looking at national policy and strategy, and you have to kind of back up a little bit and go, all right, what is this country that's going to do this to country? What's country A going to do to country B? What's their reasoning? Why? It's not just because they're angry. There's something. And when you start digging into things like national strategic policy, when you start listening to leaders that are coming from the Pentagon or are sitting inside of the Beltway advising the president and advising the senior leadership of the country, between the insight that you gain, the thought processes that you get to learn about, and how you then implement them in, of course, writing papers. It's all about writing papers. A lot of talking in class, but it's all about writing papers.
Sure.
And then, framing the solutions. And it's kind of the same thing when I moved into this field. I mean, this company was founded a little bit ahead of me. I was the fourth employee, and so there's a lot of problems that you have when it's a small startup, and you've got to figure out all the hats, and which way do you take the product, which way do you take the service, what's your beachhead market going to be when you're trying to figure out how to get something that you want to grow in an environment where people don't want to spend money because nobody does, right?
Right.
And it's very similar, the problems. Like, I've met a lot of entrepreneurs since I've been out, since I retired, and they all come across as very big thinkers, and they're very good at seeing large problems and getting that ship through that tight spot to get
Mhm.
it solved. Um,
Right.
it's
Well,
just it's
well, yeah, yeah. Sorry for interrupting. I absolutely agree with everything you just said. My time as a student at Command and Staff College, I had been to a number of different schools in the Marine Corps up to that point, and some are good, some are okay, and it's not really the curriculum. Sometimes it's who's doing it, right, and some of the dynamics that happen. But I can tell you, uh, Command and Staff College was incredible. That was absolutely an eye opener for me. It gave me a very different perspective on military education and the whole thing about connecting with people. That is all about relationship building, and maintaining relationships over time. And just like you, I'm sure they brought in folks that were industry leaders, CEOs, bring in we actually had some chief justices come in and talk, and we just had a whole, a lot of really intelligent people that have done well, former commanders, general officers, and they all kind of repeated the theme on, relationships, and talk about critical thinking and developing scenarios. I mean, it really is a career broadening, mind-opening thing. And I feel blessed that I was able to go, like you, and actually attend the school as a student. So yeah, that's tremendous. I'm glad that you had that same experience. That's good to hear.
It was
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. So you finished up there, and you wound up your last stint in the Army. You were the director of operations at 52nd Explosive Ordnance Disposal Group.
Mhm.
And then from there, you transitioned to what you're doing now. So let's talk about your transition. Everyone's got a different story. Everyone's transition is unique. Some folks, it's easy. At least it looks easy, right?
Yeah, it looks.
Others have a more difficult go at transition. Um, let's chat about yours. You wind up leaving the military. Did you have a plan? Was it something that, hey, I know I'm leaving, so I need to do X, Y, and Z, or hey, this leaving thing is happening quick. What the heck am I going to do?
It was a bit of a shock. So I tried to retire 3 times. It was denied 3 times. The last time it was denied, I got sent to the Naval War College, which ended up with an additional duty service obligation. So I knew I was stuck for at least 2 years. What I decided to do, because I mean, I love the career field, but I said, look, I haven't really done anything on myself for medical. Um, I, I'm going to start getting everything that I need to get cataloged, and I got a couple years to get it done. So I was the group 3, and I went in to basically start getting it on my medical records. And they start looking at me, and he starts, oh, your right foot's numb. Yeah, it's been numb for like 10, 12 years now. It's in my record. You can go back and look at it. And he starts looking at me, and he goes, okay, well, when this popped up, you were overseas and you couldn't we couldn't do anything, or I was in Korea as the EOD guy that run all the stuff in Korea. And he said, well, we could do it here, so let's take a look. And they sent me off to specialist. He said, your L3, 4, and 5 need to be fused, so we're gonna do that surgery. And I said, no, you're not cutting on me. I like playing golf, and there's other options that we can exercise. And their answer was, with you saying no to that surgery, you're basically going to be bound, forcibly retired through a med board. So from the day I said no, 58 days later, I was retired. I
Wow.
I had no idea how fast that could happen. But I mean, I remember walking back at the group headquarters, and it was going back to a staff meeting, and the boss pulled me aside and he goes, "Why are you ashen? It's August, it's hot outside, and you look like you just walked out of a freezer." And I was just in shock. The
Yeah,
whole career planning on retiring is one thing. You're going to have a transition time and thinking about it. But like, hey, here's your orders. You're gone in 2 weeks. That was a big kick in the reality that you own.
sure. And it's actually a bit of a disservice too, quite frankly. That they would have. I mean, I get it, right? It's a numbers game, no matter who you are, or even who you think you are. It is a numbers game in the end. But man, you would hope that they would have at least have given you a little bit of more time for transition. Yeah, my time at my last few months of the Marine Corps was they had changed my orders, and it was not in line with what was going to happen. And I'd always smartly saluted,
Yeah.
and just kind of the quick end of it, I said, no, I don't want to do that. And by deciding that, then I was done, right? And so I had about 90 days ish. Same thing. I submitted to retire, and they said you're good. And then but I was a battalion commander, so I couldn't just start transitioning. I had to stay there to the very end. And so yeah, transition came quick, and it was surprising uh, how difficult it was. I didn't think it would be as hard as it wound up being. So
Yeah, what crept up for me was things I didn't even envision would be there. I mean, it. I'm a fairly malleable person. So I made the joke all the time, and if you know anybody that's met me, I make I'm going to go to Home Depot and cut 2x4s. Ma'am, how long would you like that? And
that's right.
that's 100%. That's the amount of responsibility I want for a while. And that was the joke of what I was planning on doing. And we're set up enough to where that would work for a while. My wife's a college professor, so there wasn't anything that was ridiculous. But
Sure.
the parts that got me is things like I missed the camaraderie. I I miss some of this sounds really bad from an EOD guy because you ever met one, we really don't like the accountability, but I miss the thought process of everything I do goes to a desired end state. And I'm accountable for my actions. And I'm accountable for my outputs, and what needs to get done is going to have a team effort behind it because it's something we've decided we need to do. And that's not necessarily what you see in corporate America. And
Yeah.
everybody's got their own priorities. Um, I'm I'm one of those guys that, like, the single guys in the barracks for Chris's party. We're bringing them over to the house. You're it's a family, a team, that kind of thing. That kind of got me a little bit.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah. I agree. And that's something that a lot of folks that go through transition, they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about, I need a job. Most folks, right? What am I going to do? Some folks want to kind of extend whatever they're doing on active duty and, turn that into a job, working
right.
with the government. And a lot of times that's fairly, I don't want to say it's easy to do, but that's, it's a little easier than deciding to go do something completely different, and so a lot goes into the transition. And I think the thing that a lot of folks don't think about is what you just said. They get out and then all of what they were used to is gone. And even if they, didn't really go all in on some of the things you talked about, though, that's some of the first stuff that they start missing
It's like,
because it's gone. Yeah, and it's very different on the outside. I learned that you don't trust people as much as you're inherently trusting folks that you work with in the military. That's a that's a quick way to have issues by being more trusting than you should be. I learned a valuable lesson that way. But yeah, absolutely, people get out and the change is a big change, and that sense of purpose, that that battle rhythm that you had in the military is gone in a day. And so, what do you put in place of that? And, having the discipline and, finding those things that make you who you are and trying to put that into a career path where you can have similar gratification, there's a lot that goes into that. And so, yeah, it looks like you went from your time in the army
hmm,
to what you're doing now, and that's significant to me because it looks like you've been there for a while, and it looks like it's probably a bit of a passion for you based on what we talked about here.
yeah. This So sort of like how I ended up in EOD, happenstance. We happened to need a couple of EOD folks. They happened to come in a helicopter. They happen to be clean. They happen to be good people. Happenstance. I mean, this sounds really bad, but I had very little plans to do something beyond let's see what I can find. I'm here shockingly fast at the house. I was geo bachelor. My wife had already set the home up. I was doing the geo bachelor thing down in Campbell in Kentucky. So I show up, and one of the things in that 58 days they had me do was you will put a resume on Indeed, and you will put a resume on one of the other ones. Just to get your clearing papers, you had to do it. So I threw it on there. Somebody happened to tell our founder they needed an EOD guy. He didn't know what it meant. He didn't
Mhm.
have any clue about what we did or what it would do for the company. He went on Indeed, and if you looked in New England in like January of 2019, in pretty much three-state region, I'm the only one that had EOD on their resume. So he reached out to me at 7 o'clock on a Friday night and said,
Wow.
I think I would like, set up an interview. And I was sitting at the house drinking a beer, talking to my wife, and I said, answered the email. I said, he's asked if you can call. Sure. The next Tuesday at the interview, he hired me the same day, or the very next day he hired me. And it sounds, again, kind of weird, but I went from being bomb squad guy to we deal with mail. So I'm the mail guy. But I usually use an expletive or two in front of that. Again, people who know me will know that it's an interesting joke,
Right.
but it's extremely fulfilling. I work with great people. They're very supportive of the military. We've hired more EOD guys since, and that's who we're going to keep hiring because they work well with customers, and we do a lot of positive things with our clients. We're not selling them something that they might not ever use. They talk
Right.
to us regularly. So I absolutely lucked into a great job.
Yeah, that's incredible. Because as you know, the whole transition thing can be a knuckle roll for people because depending on what you did, you have experiences in certain things, and interviewing. I guess maybe as a junior enlisted person, you're kind of interviewing when you go on boards and things like that. So you've got some experience with that. But as an officer, at least in the Marine Corps, you didn't really go through boards in terms of promotions or
Right.
most things like that. But yeah, writing a resume, interviewing, all of the things that you have to kind of learn quickly as you're exiting service, it can take a while, and some folks get discouraged when they're not hearing back, and that can lead to a whole other round of issues. So yeah, you were very fortunate that
Very lucky.
the happenstance part. So that's great. So you were able to kind of bypass some of those things that most folks deal with in their transition journey. And so now, so the company you're with now, Ray Secure, you're the chief security officer there, uh, and I know from our discussion a couple months ago, and then looking at your LinkedIn profile, you mentioned the mail, and so you guys, that's kind of your thing in terms of ensuring the security and safety of mail. Is this mainly in the corporate world? So you have specific clients that you're working with to provide your services?
Yeah, so we primarily corporate. So it's a very interesting company. When I came on is the fourth, I think it was fourth person hired. Some of the largest companies in the world were already clients. So the founder had done an amazing amount of work. It's like a backwards startup. You usually get small clients and you work your way up. He walked and got big ones. So I mean, they're on your phone. You pay bills with them. I mean, it's their significant amount of or significant amount of clients.
Sure.
So we branched out since. I mean, we've dealt with we had the Pete Buttigieg campaign. They decided that they were going to do their security with the English grad student from Notre Dame who had no background in it whatsoever. Here, you handle the problem. And imagine that situation. Him following Mike Pence in Indiana, he had a lot of stuff getting mailed to him and sent to him, and with our help and a little bit of technology, nothing ever got to shut down that campaign. We've
Wow.
since started going into prisons and correction systems because when COVID hit, you shut down all of the visitors, but the drugs never fell off. So then you really only have two avenues of approach. Now we're talking military, so I go straight back to an infantry term, but it's
Tracking.
either the guards carrying it in or it's coming in via correspondence. Okay, well, we cut off the correspondence for anything personal. They remove it all. They still get all their legal mail. So people will take their legal correspondence, dip it in K2, spice, drugs, liquid THC, whatever, slap it in the middle of their documentation, write legal mail on the outside, and try to get it delivered. And it's happening all the time. So,
Wow.
I mean, that's where I was at earlier this week, finding cell phone components inside of legal mail hidden under a staple intended to allow the person to recharge their contraband cell phone that they have in their cell that the guards haven't found yet.
That is incredible. The ingenuity there, you have to kind of give it to them.
Oh, you
I
do.
mean, that's pretty incredible. Wow.
You definitely do. So, I mean,
And
it
then the
goes,
fact that you guys have to be looking to defeat that, right? So you're always, I would imagine you're always learning things too as you're
yeah.
going through this process. Wow,
The
that's
first
pretty
couple
amazing.
times I was in a prison, I had this champion that from down in Virginia, and I was asking her questions like, why are we screening all these things? I mean, it came directly from the publisher to here, and she looks at me like an infant because I'm asking a dumb question. Because the brother-in-law works at the place where this is printed and knows that it's going to his brother-in-law, and he inserts it in the beginning of the process. Um, there's all sorts of learning experiences that I get to have through this job.
Sure. Yeah, Will, I've always wondered this, and I'm, certainly a lot of people do. If these people would take their minds and the ingenuity and put it to something good,
Oh, yeah.
they could do wonderful things for society and themselves, but they choose to continue to make bad choices. Thankfully we have folks like you that are on the tip of the spear in that direction, doing what you guys are doing with your company. Um, so yeah, I was thinking about this as we're talking. So you're saying that you guys are looking to hire more EOD. So that kind of tells me that you guys are veteran friendly.
Hmm.
Uh,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. What advice would you give somebody that's in that field, or someone that from the military that would like to do what you're doing? What can you share with us about that?
Well, if you're looking for a UD guy, it's it's pretty easy compared to some of the other stuff we've done. The big thing that you need to figure out is um, most of our corporate clients is how to talk and deal with corporate in interchanges, interactions, and then uh, to getting into it, it's not hard. I mean, you just really need to learn the field, and we teach all that obviously in house. But for just general thoughts on people transitioning and what they need to do, I don't know. That depends, I guess, on the lens at what you're looking for. If you're looking to just get a job, okay, we can do that. There's jobs all over the place. If you're looking for another career or another passion, make sure whatever you're doing is something you really care about, or something's at least tied to something that you care about. I got a lot of friends of mine that EOD folks that got out, and they are absolutely miserable. I figured I would, because like you mentioned a little bit ago, try to take what you've done in your career and use it in your next career. Well, for us, that means sitting on a UXO grid somewhere at a formerly used defense site, blowing up duds, or doing something that is, you know, safety related or fairly mundane. I was looking at doing demining stuff in like Cambodia. I That's a passion of mine. Demining is something that I find extremely useful, giving back, removing things that are horrible in the first place and shouldn't have been used and hurting
Right.
children, right? But whatever you do, try to try to do something you like, something you want.
No, absolutely, and thanks, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff Knight. He's retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. A great guy. I've known him, with LinkedIn. He was just saying goodbye, and he enjoyed the conversation, which that happens sometimes. Will we have during this live interview, we have folks that will come in, stay while they can, and because it's middle of the day, they can't, necessarily stay the full time. So, but yeah, I always appreciate Jeff's contribution and his support of the program here. But yeah, that's good insight because you know when you look at all the things that you can do versus what you want to do, a lot of times it's hard to figure that stuff out. And uh, folks that I brought on the program, a couple folks were like, "Hey, this is so obvious to me. You know, why? We learn how to plan." And we learn how to execute. So why is it when we come up to the edge of the cliff when we're transitioning and our minds fall out of our heads? Why don't we apply the same thing that we've learned to this objective, right? Why don't we use the skills that we've you know the blood, sweat, and tears we put into who we are and do those same things, adjust as you need to. And I thought, that is funny that a lot of folks don't do that. They get up and it's like, oh my God, everything's so different, and they become
I did.
overwhelmed.
Where I was putting resumes together. So I retired in like January 19th of 19, and my terminal leave was backed up 90 days. So I'd been at the house for about 3 months. I started here in February of 19, so about 3 months in the house, and I realized after I'd been here a while that I didn't even put that thought process in where I was looking to get a job or what I was looking to do. It was, this is somewhat related to what I'm good at. Geographically speaking, it's close enough so I don't have to move. Yeah, I'll apply for it. I would have been miserable had I not stumbled into this place. I mean, running a getting a startup off the ground is extremely painful. It's not it's an experience in and of itself. Imagine like you're the expeditionary unit going in, and you don't know what you got, but what's in the back of your truck, and you have to go solve all the world's problems, right? It's kind of the same thing, but at least it's fun. Um, I really would have been miserable had I not like I said, stumbled into this, because none of those jobs were anything that I was actually interested in.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's, I think that happens with a lot of folks.
right.
And I wound up when I transitioned out, I stayed on the nonprofit side, and it was focused on assisting veterans as they transition out, getting them through training and then placing them in a career field in the renewable energy sector. And so the startup thing, you're dead on. You're doing a bit of everything. And yeah, this is your title, but you're also, sweeping the floors, you're rolling up your sleeves, doing and connecting those areas that need to be connected, and you're not necessarily always doing what you thought you'd be doing, right? Because it's required. And there's a lot to that. Absolutely.
I should
So
not have been running our website. I promise you that. I'm the wrong person to have administrative rights over a website or a marketing campaign.
hey, but it's amazing what you can do,
Yeah.
once you are put into that position to make it happen. So that's funny. Well, now as far as your company goes, is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of what you're doing, or is there, is that kind of some things you just can't get into, or?
No, they're just for general safety of people. So, like, if you look at most threats, and I'm a numbers person, so I collected up all the threats that happen open source, and since I've been here, we we catalog them, we figure out what's going on, so we can give trends and trends analysis stuff. A lot of these threats that show up hit people in their home. A lot of the stuff that's happening, white powder threats in companies and corporations, a lot of the drugs that's going through the mail right now. Um, there's nobody looking at this stuff before it gets to you, the person that's being mailed to,
Wow.
unless you were in the Beltway, and after the anthrax threats 2001, all these things show up, and a lot of innocent people end up having something that could possibly hurt them, whether it's at the home or the office. A lot of it can just be handled with a screening process. People want to spend a lot of money on programs and processes. We sell a piece of equipment. It's fantastic. It does an amazing job helping people find threats before they open, but there's still a human being sitting there, and a lot of the and it kind of holds true to most other things in the world. A little bit of training, a little bit of time, and paying attention to carrying out what you're doing can stop other people from getting hurt, and it's just kind of what we live by.
Right. Well, yeah, it's just a shame that things like this happen in life. But as I kind of spoke to earlier, we're fortunate that we have folks like you who are passionate about what they do and the organization that you're with, because it comes down to you're saving lives, really, and you're protecting folks from injury. It, it's so hard to believe when you pull back the layer and see the potential for all the things that could really go wrong, and
Mhm.
that there are people out there that have an intent to do exactly that. It's pretty surprising that those folks are out there, and for whatever reason they're doing these things. Having layers of security that you guys provide is a big deal, especially for folks that are in politics. I could imagine
Right.
that there are always people trying to do just that, to get to these people in some form or fashion.
So yeah, usually it's interesting though. If you we're what we do is look at part of the one of the steps of the escalation of violence, right? Workplace violence, whatever you want to call it. So if you look, somebody tweets at a company or tweets at a CEO, and they don't get a response, because why would they? And then they send an email and nobody responds. One of their next steps is usually sending something physical at that company or at that person. If that doesn't get the desired response, it increases. If you go back and look at a lot of the active shooters that were, first off, you have a lot of um, insider threats, but it's part of an escalation of anger and violence. So if you
Right.
catch it, and it's just one of those trigger points, you go, yeah, yeah, this person might really need some more attention paid to them, and we're just part of that process. Kind of like
Right.
a weather vane on whether something is or is not about to happen.
Sure. And I would imagine there is absolutely a progression with that, right? It just doesn't,
Nope.
I mean, there probably are one-offs that might do that, but yeah, I mean, if you know there's, certain signals out there and what to look for and how to address those things, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, timing wise, we're just about in an hour. It looks like some of the folks that we had on have, gone on with their day. And again, that happens. I guess the last thing I want to chat with you about, you talked about, if you wouldn't be doing what you're doing now, you were thinking about being over in the other part of the world, disarming, mines and, because that sounds like, the passion that you had there to help others to do something, for the good. Um, are you doing anything else like that? Not, not disarming, mines, but
No,
are you spending any time with uh, volunteering or anything like that? And well, I
I've
mean, and if you're not, I mean, that I completely understand. You were busy because the discussion we had before that, you should be sleeping right now.
no, I unfortunately I'm not. Now I've talked to a few organizations within ASIS. There's military communities that I'm trying to volunteer my time with, but it's one of those if you can't knock down your time enough to say I am available that weekend, it doesn't really help anybody. You're more of a
Right.
hindrance at that point if they expect you to be there and you can't. So hopefully in the not too distant future, my calendar will get cleaned up enough to where I can dedicate some of that time. But currently, unfortunately, I've not had time to do that.
Yeah. And yeah, again, like for those that don't know, when we were chatting beforehand, Will was telling me, within the last 24 hours, what he's been doing, where he's been, he was traveling and
Yeah.
was on a webinar just prior to, sitting down to doing this. And he's probably going to go, you're probably off to the next objective, but I hope you maybe get a nap or something.
I'm gonna have a beer and sit down for a little bit. But
Yeah,
yeah.
there,
So my
there you
next
go.
2 weeks I get to spend in prisons. So
Oh,
starting on Sundays and ending on Saturday nights, we're gonna sit in prisons and look at drugs. So
wow. Yeah, that's pretty intense. But all right, well, yeah, we're right at an hour now. Will, I thank you so much for your time. It
Scott,
would have been easy to say, "Hey, Scott, I've just got so much going on here," but it's important that you did come on and share your story. There's folks that are out there and they're about to transition. They're listening to this. There's folks who have that are maybe a little stuck, and sometimes just hearing a couple words or understanding somebody's story, it resonates with them. They can relate, and it gives them maybe a different perspective.
yeah,
Or they reach out for assistance too sometimes, which is cool, if you can help somebody. So okay, all right, well, hey, thank you for your service, Will.
you,
EOD is an absolute necessity. uh, the professionals that are in those organizations, I know when I went into Iraq, our EOD team, we had a mass sergeant that led the team, and all of those guys were studs. They were professionals. They knew their job. They all were able to brief. The Mass Sergeant made sure that he wasn't the only one briefing, right? He would bring him in and talk to the commander or talk to me as the XO, and we trusted those guys inherently. They were just good folks. So yeah, thank you for your service, and thank you for what you're doing now with Ray Secure. Have a great weekend coming up here. Get some rest and be careful over the next 2 weeks.
thanks, Scott. Thank you for your service too.